Hey, what's up, Central? Want to welcome everybody that's watching online today. Thank you so much for connecting with us. We want to give a big shout out to our Crescent campus. We continue to be amazed at what God is doing over there on that site and can't wait to see what God is going to do in the future in Creston. Hey, if you have a Bible today, Romans chapter 1 is where we're headed. If you don't have a Bible, that's all right. We're going to put the scripture up on screen. You can follow along there. If you don't have a Bible, like you legitimately don't have one, let us know. Send us an email, and we'll get you hooked up with one. We want you to have a copy of the physical Bible in your hands. And so if you need one of those, let us know. We're starting a brand new series today called Anchors. Now, anchors can be a good thing and a bad thing. Anchors can be used to keep us grounded, but they can also hold us back, and they can weigh us down. And when they're weighing us down, that's when it's a bad thing. Years ago, we had a boat. We had a ski boat, and we loved to go out skiing and tubing. And then summertime sports, softball and baseball, started ramping up. And so for years, our boat stayed in storage, and finally we got rid of it. But years ago, we loved to go boating. We loved to go any chance that we got, we were out on the water. And one of the cool things, besides just skiing and tubing, is we went to this lake outside of Indianapolis, and one of the cool things was to try to find like a cove that was on the lake, and try to get there before everybody else, and try to find one. There were multiple ones out there, but try to find one that you could just kind of just go in there and chill. And you'd go in there and you'd put the anchor down, and you would just kind of lay on the boat and take a nap, or you'd jump in the water and you'd swim, or you'd lay on the tube and you would take a nap and just kind of chill. Like, I just love being on the water and chilling. And so you'd be anchored down, and you could just stay there for hours, and the boat's not going anywhere, not doing anything. It's incredible. Well, one time, I allowed a friend of mine to borrow our boat. He was going to take his family out boating, and he had been out with us multiple times. He had driven the boat. He had pulled us while we were skiing, pulled us while we were tubing. He knew everything there was to know about the boat. And so I thought, okay, go ahead, take out the boat. You guys have an incredible time. And so a few hours after he was scheduled to be on the boat, he gave me a call, and he said, Ryan, something's wrong with the boat. Like, what do you mean something's wrong with the boat? He said, I'm sitting out here, I'm in the middle of Raccoon Lake, this boat is not going. Like, the engine's running, everything is running fine, but we just can't go. Like, we're trying to ski, we can't pull up skiers, so we tried tubing, the boat has no power. The engine is revving as loud as it can go, there is just no power. He's like, I don't know what to do. Like, we're out in the middle, I don't want to keep driving, I don't want to pull it in, I don't know. So I said, okay, I'll be out there. So I stopped everything, and I headed out to the lake, and I got out to the dock, and I called him when I was close, and I was like, okay, why don't you just start bringing it in? Well, he's bringing the boat in. I'm standing at the end of the dock, and this is an honest-to-God true story. I'm standing at the end of the dock, and I'm watching him come in, and I'm seeing my boat, and it's coming in, and I can hear it, and it's loud, and it is like almost all the way up in the air like this, and immediately I knew what he's doing, or what he had wrong, and I'm yelling and I'm shouting, you have the anchor down, idiot! Pull up the anchor! And he's, what? Like, it's the anchor. I have no idea to this day how he didn't catch everything on the bottom of the lake and just pull the bottom or the back end of my boat off. I have no idea. But he gets close, and we went through the anchor thing, and he's like, didn't even know there was an anchor. One of his kids had put the anchor down when they were in the cove. He was smart enough to know that, but he was asleep when they left, and so he didn't think about pulling the anchor. Nobody knew, and for hours or whatever, this guy was trying to get across the lake with an anchor weighing him down. So anchors can be good things and bad things. They can keep us grounded, and they can get us in a spot where we can enjoy life and that we can enjoy everything happening around us, but they can also hold us back. We're going to see both things, and we're going to see all of that throughout this entire series. Let me set today up like this. I was talking to some pastor friends this week, and we were talking about how it has been 20 weeks, how it's been 5 months since the corona outbreak, since all of the shutdowns happened. 20 weeks. And at our church, we went 7 weeks totally online, and we've been back on site for 13. I think this is our 14th week. This is our 13th or 14th Sunday or weekend back. And so over that time, a lot of things have changed around us. A lot of things have changed in our society, in our world. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we don't even know if it's going to go back to the way that it used to be. But we started talking about specific changes that have been happening in our churches. And we started talking about how this potentially has been a good thing. And let me say this. Let me say how I think it's become a good thing. I think it's good for Christianity overall. I think it's good for churches overall because it's really causing us to examine the roots of what we believe, why we believe it, and why we do church the way that we do church. All right? And so for me, that's why I think it's a good thing, because it's causing us all to stop and think about those things. Why? Why do we do church? Why is church important? Why is it important to be in the building? Why is it important to gather together? Why does the Bible talk about, like, don't neglect the gathering of the saints? Why is that such a big thing? And we're seeing that play out. And that's another message for another time, but it's huge for us to look at that right now. But then the conversation switched to, well, why aren't people coming back? If all of that is important, and if that's what the Bible talks about, that we need to be together and we need to be gathering, like why aren't people coming back? And why are so many church leaders right now talking about online church, and there are all of these programs and all this money that you have to pay for online church and online training and all of this other stuff? And it became like, why aren't people coming back? And then that shifted to the conversation of, is it really COVID? Or is it something bigger? And you know what? That's a good question. Because in churches all across America, people are walking away. It's a reality. It was happening pre-COVID, that people are just walking away from church. Now, I think one of the reasons that people are walking away from church in droves, and I'm not going to bore you with statistics and statistical information today, but this week I'm reading all of that stuff. I'm reading the statistics, and I'm seeing all this stuff about why people are walking away from church. And they're saying things like why they're going, and I was fascinated about like the list of why people were walking away. Like people were saying, well, I'm leaving because I don't believe in the Bible. They're saying we leave because we have a hard time believing and buying into certain things. Like there are a lot of things that people are saying. But what I found incredibly fascinating on this list was that people, like no one on the list said that they were walking away because they didn't believe in God or they didn't believe in Jesus. The number one reason for people leaving the church, the reason people are walking away from the church is because of church people. Because the church is full of condemnation. That's the number one reason. Is the condemning language, the condemnation that happens from the church. Like if you think about the past 20 or 30 years, and you can be really honest about church history and church leadership and the stupidity that has happened with that. You think about some things that have happened in the world around us. Condemnation has always been a tool that the church has used to control people. Like stick with me. Let me walk you through a couple of things. If you remember in like the 80s, remember the 1980s, some of you are like, you have no idea what those were. Those were good times growing up in the 80s. But in the 80s, if you were around back then, you remember when AIDS came out. Remember that? When AIDS came out, church leaders, evangelical Christians, right? The church community used that as a tool of condemnation to attack people who were gay. Many of you remember that, right? And they said, this is God's judgment on the gays. Remember that? Remember that? That's what they used. Back in 2004, remember in 2004, there was a tsunami that happened in Thailand. Do you remember that? That was devastating. I worked in a church where we actually supported a church that was over in Thailand, and I remember, they worked with an organization that supported churches over there, and I remember those people coming over years later, and I'm seeing all the pictures and getting the videos and all that stuff. It was horrible It was horrible, the destruction and devastation that happened in Thailand. But I remember watching all of that and being mortified as Christian leaders, popular Christian leaders, began to stand up and say that was God's judgment on a Buddhist country. God was judging them because of their religion. I'm like, how do you get that? Like, how do you get that? Like, how can you even say that? That's God's judgment on a Buddhist country? And then, like, Katrina came in 2005, and they didn't say that was God's judgment on a Christian country. Remember that? Remember when Katrina came to New Orleans? They didn't say that was God's judgment on a Christian country. They said that's God's judgment on poor black people. Remember that? See, every time something happens, every time there's devastation, like, people were quick to condemn the people that it happened to. Like every time there's a school shooting, let's just throw this one out there. Every time there's a school shooting, which is absolutely horrible and heartbreaking, we would all admit that. But every time, there's always some idiot that comes on TV and says, well, we took God out of schools. What do you expect? First of all, we didn't take him out of schools, idiot. Stop saying that. Like, he's still there. But the church, the church, we speak this condemnation, and it just doesn't work. A dying, hurting world, a lost world that is seeking hope, is watching us, and we're standing up, and instead of offering hope and love, and instead of offering the solution, we're throwing out condemnation. Like, that's not what the world needs. Now think about this. If that's condemnation on a large scale, let's talk about it on a smaller scale. Because it's not just the condemnation that has happened outside of the church walls. Some people, the reason that you're really considering, or maybe the reason you have already walked away from faith, has nothing to do with how you feel about God or Jesus. It has everything to do with his people. Because, like, it's not that you doubt God exists, it's how the church has treated you, or how the church has treated your divorced mom or your gay sister. Maybe you've personally felt condemned by the church or the people in the church. If that's you, two things real quick. Number one, I'm sorry. I am. And the reason that I can say I'm sorry is because for years, I was part of the crowd that really did condemn people that I thought weren't as good as me. Number two, I understand. Listen, we all have a wounded church story. Every one of us. We've all been hurt. But like I told you 2 weeks ago, just because you're wounded doesn't mean you're worthless. Just because you've been wounded does not mean that you are worthless. You still have value in the sight of God. You still have value to the kingdom of God. You are important, and you're way too important and way too valuable to sit on the sidelines. God created you on purpose, with a purpose, and for a purpose. You have value to him. And so with that, today I want to walk you through this passage in Romans chapter 1. And if you don't get anything else I say today, like if you only walk away with one big idea, like if you want the sermon in the sentence, this is it. We must anchor ourselves to compassion, not condemnation. We've got to be a people who are full of compassion, not condemnation. Listen, when it comes to talking to people, when it comes to reaching people, when it comes to us ministering and serving to people, no matter who they are, no matter where they've been, no matter what they've done or what's been done to them, no matter what they're currently living out in their life, I really do believe to the core of my being that compassion is greater than condemnation. Let me walk you through this idea in Romans. First, let me kind of set it up so you know where I'm going. The book of Romans is my favorite book in the entire Bible. My favorite. It's the one that I read the most. Chapter 9, if you want to know, if you ever take, I wonder what Pastor Ryan's favorite Bible passage is. Romans chapter 9. That's it. Romans chapter 9 is my favorite chapter in the entire Bible. Romans is the book that I have studied the most. It's the book I've read the most. I love the book of Romans. That's why a couple summers ago, as a matter of fact, right now on Facebook, these memories keep popping up. So 2 summers ago, like right now, 2 years ago right now, this time, I was in Rome. And man, things don't usually geek me out, but being in Rome, I was there. My daughter was playing softball in Italy. We got to go to Rome, so I was geeked out about softball, but being in Rome was incredible. I read the book of Romans probably like 6 times while we were in Rome. We got to sit by the Mediterranean Sea. We got to swim in it, do stuff. I sat out there and read the book of Romans. It was just a special time for me. It was incredible. Anyway, the book of Romans was written by the Apostle Paul to Christians in Rome, to the church in Rome. Now, something that you need to keep in mind, when you look at the modern Bible, it's different than what happened when it was really going on. When they wrote letters to churches in the Bible, they weren't broken up by chapter and verse like our Bibles are today. It was a continual thought process. That's important to know, because at the end of Romans chapter 1, like I used to read through Romans, and I would get to the end of chapter 1, and I would think, well, dang, man, that's harsh, man. And so chapter 2 is coming, man. So there's going to be a new thought, a new idea, a new plan, or whatever, and things are going to get better. But Romans chapter 1 and Romans chapter 2 flow together. The reason that's important is because we're going to see in a little while, it shows how jacked up it is to be anchored in condemnation. All right? Here we go. Romans chapter 1, starting verse 18. But God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful, wicked people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Now let me pause. Let me say this real quick. I have been in church environments in the past that seem to get really excited about the fact that some people are going to go to hell and be punished for all eternity. You've been around those people? Yeah, they're going to get what they deserve. I can't leave. What they did, they deserve that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to keep on moving. People that are excited about other people receiving eternal punishment are nothing like Jesus. Seriously, people that get excited about other people dying and going to hell and receiving eternal damnation are nothing like Jesus, period. Well, you don't understand, Pastor. That's my mom. Well, your mom needs to get saved, okay? Let's keep going. Verse 19. They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. No excuse for not knowing God. Now, I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but the reason that people are walking away from church and not even it's not because they're necessarily doubting the Bible. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with them not believing in God. In fact, I would probably say this. I would argue that the more science and research that we develop points to the fact that there is a creator of this world. Like think about this. How can you look at billions and billions and billions, I don't know how many billions there are, but how can you look at the stars and the galaxy and not believe that there is a God? Seriously, how can you look at that? I mean, think about that. Do you think that really a couple of them just slammed together and that's why we're here? I mean, nobody here would think that we could go to Walmart today and buy like a 1,000-piece Lego set and look at the box and take that box and put all of the Legos in your dryer and say, hey, you know what? In 2 million years, all these Legos are going to come together. Yeehaw! Like nobody would think that. Nobody would think that that's good. And if you wouldn't believe that about like a 1,000-piece Lego set, why would we believe that as something as complex as the world that we live in? I mean, there is obvious proof that God created the world that we live in. It's the majority of people aren't doubting God. It's the people of God that people have a problem with. The Bible goes on to say this in verse 21. Yes, they knew God. They knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. When we start to drift from God, oftentimes it's because we have stopped thanking him, and we start getting bitter at him for something that we feel entitled to. And I've taught you this before, that entitlement leads to bitterness. Entitlement always leads to bitterness, but thankfulness eradicates bitterness in our lives. I'm telling you, since I taught you guys this months ago, this is something that I started doing in my life. I try to practice this every single day. Every day. Every day, I just try to find one thing, and I'll thank God for it. Now, a lot of days, there's more than one thing, and I could go on and on and on, and we could, this is probably another message for another time, but one day, find something, one thing every day. Find one thing every day to thank him for. I don't got anything I can thank God for, Pastor. Really? Can you hear? Can you see? Can you smell? Can you taste? Can you walk? Did you sleep indoors last night? Do you have food in your refrigerator? Are you dressed right now because you got up this morning and had all kinds of options of what to wear in your closet? There are lots of things that we take for granted, church, that we could thank God for. And so we need to just one thing a day, just one thing, just begin to thank him. That was just a little mini sermon. All right, hopefully that speaks to somebody. Let's keep reading. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worship idols made to look like mere people and birds and animals and reptiles. Isn't that weird? Worship is real simple. Worship is where we put our time, our energy, and our money. Right? Like that's what's worship, right? Where do we put our time, our energy, and our money? Right? That's what or who we worship. It really is. You want to know what or who you really worship? Look at where do you put your time? Where do you put your energy? Where do you put your money? That's what you worship. Now, I'm going to say this because it's in the text. Can you believe at one time there was a society 2,000 years ago that Paul wrote about, the Apostle Paul wrote about, that there was a group of people, a society, a community, the entire place of Rome that worshiped images of birds and animals and reptiles. I cannot believe that there would ever be a society that would worship images of birds and animals and reptiles. So much has changed today. I hope that didn't step on anybody's toes. Let's keep going. So God abandoned them to do whatever shameful things their hearts desired. You should probably take that big Hawkeye bird down from there. Somebody probably going to walk out. So God abandoned them to do whatever shameful things their hearts desired. As a result, they did vile and degrading things with each other's bodies. They traded the truth about God for a lie. So they worshiped and served the things God created instead of the Creator himself, which we all have a tendency to do that, right? Right? They worship instead of the Creator himself, who is worthy of eternal praise. Amen. Paul's preaching so good right here, he just said amen to himself. Verse 26, that is why God abandoned them to their shameful desires. Even the women turned against the natural way to have sex and instead indulged in sex with each other. And the men, instead of having normal sexual relations with women, burned with lust for each other. Men did shameful things with other men, and as a result of this sin, they suffered within themselves the penalty they deserved. Now, typically, this is the text in the New Testament that churches use to tear apart people who are gay. But that's not the point that we're making today. In fact, Paul doesn't just talk about sexual sin in this text. He goes on to say this. Pay attention, all right? Because this is huge. For those that stop at that portion of this text right here, it keeps going. And watch what happens. Look at this. Since they thought it foolish to acknowledge God, he abandoned them to their foolish thinking and let them do things that should never be done. Their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. I'm going to read that again. Their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. Let me ask you this question. Can you find yourself on that list? Can you? Can you find yourself on that list? Because there are people that read through that passage, that they read through the sexual sin part of that, and they say, well, that's not me. I'm not gay. I'm married. I'm doing things the way. Let's just stop and let's walk through this again. And let's see if you find yourself on this list. Wickedness. I mean, none of us would call ourselves wicked, right? I mean, none of us would say, I went and saw the play Wicked. But none of us would say that. Sin. It specifically just calls out the word sin. All of those things are sin, but sin by itself right here is just mentioned. Sin. It's wickedness, comma, sin, right? I mean, it's there. Sin. I don't sin. I mean, come on, Pastor. I mean, I'm wrestling with some stuff. I'm struggling through some things. I mean, there are some things that I know aren't exactly right, but come on, like sin? Greed. You ever been greedy? You ever been greedy? Ever been greedy? My wife, listen, I love her. Love her, love her, love her. But every time we go out to eat, every time the waiter or the waitress will come by, would you like dessert? I don't know. What do you have? Well, we have, yeah, I'll take that. Mary, you want anything? Oh, no, I'm full. I can't have anything. Dessert comes out. Can I have a bite? No, you can't have a bite. If you wanted a bite, you should have got your own flipping dessert. You can't touch my dessert. Greed, right? Greed. Hate. You ever hated? She hates anytime I use an illustration like that. I could probably tell you that. Envy. You ever been envious of somebody? I have. This is something I struggle with probably a lot. Envy. Murder. All right, I haven't done that one yet. But keep pushing. Quarreling and deception. Anybody guilty of deception? Anybody watching online right now guilty of deception? No? Let's talk about the weight on your driver's license. Pull that thing out. What you got on there? Right? Like, come on. Deception. Malicious behavior and gossip. If you have a Facebook account. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep going. Verse 30. They are backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, and boastful. They invent new ways of sinning, and they disobey their parents. That's a good one to show to your kids right there. Now, right here, like this list, can we all admit this is not a good list? Like, this is not a list of like, if you're single, like, this isn't the list of somebody that you want to marry. If you're hiring, you're not going to hire somebody that's full of sin and greed and hate and envy and murder and quarreling and deception. This is not a good list. And Paul keeps going on. They refuse to understand, break their promises, are heartless, and have no mercy. They know God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die, yet they do them anyway. Worse yet, they encourage others to do them too. Okay, come on, let's do this. Come on, it's okay. It's just one time. You're not going to get caught. Just this one time. Come on. I've been doing this for a long time. Come on, just do it. This is crazy. Paul has dropped the gauntlet, and that's the end of Romans chapter 1. And typically, at this point, we just kind of close our Bibles, and we're like, dang, there's some bad people in this world. And later on, we might open it up and we might read chapter 2, but we're thinking about all the stuff that Paul said, and we're thinking about, yeah, man, they got what they deserve, and they're doing this, and they're wicked, and they're bad, and they're awful. But remember, Paul is in a continual rhythm, and he didn't change subjects at Romans chapter 2. So in Romans chapter 1, I mean, he's going off. These people, they're sexually immoral, they're doing stuff they shouldn't do, they're lying, they're cheating, they're full of greed, they're worshiping idols, they're envious, they're this, they're that. And Paul's writing, don't miss this, don't forget this, Paul's writing to the church in Rome. So the book of Romans is to church people, and that's really important to remember, because after Paul says all of this stuff about all of the evil people out there, he says this in verse 1 of chapter 2. You may think that you can condemn such people, but you are just as bad. What? Every time I hear Romans 1 preached about, I never hear the preacher talk about Romans chapter 2. But don't miss this. He's telling people in the church, he says this, you may think that you can condemn such people, but you are just as bad. And you have no excuse when you say, they are wicked. And we've talked about that here at Central before. Who are the they in your life that you can't stand? Who are those people to you. Those people over there. I can't stand those people. Those people always do this. Those people always act like that. Those people always do this. Right? Who are they? Who are the they? When you say they are wicked and sinful and should be punished, you are condemning, you see this? You're condemning yourself. For you who judge others do these very same things. So Paul is basically saying the people inside the church are as jacked up as people outside of the church. And those relationships, listen to me, don't miss this. Those relationships don't come together through the people in the church who are doing the same things, condemning people who aren't in the church simply because they're not in the church. Does that make sense? Think about it like this. What's one of the first things you do when you wake up in the morning? It's one of the first things you do. Look in the mirror, right? You look in the mirror because there's been some damage the night before. Like you've laid in bed all night, you toss and turn. And when you wake up, your hair is a mess and your makeup is smeared. And so when we look in the mirror, nobody goes, whew, dang, somebody should do something about that. And then just walk away, right? No. You say, whew, this is awful. I need to fix this before I go out into the world today. Right? And then you spend some time in the mirror making some adjustments. Well, in the Bible, there's a guy named James. He's the half-brother of Jesus. And he wrote a letter to the church. And he said this in James chapter 1, verse 23. I love this. He said, for if you listen to the word and don't obey it, he's talking about the Bible, right? If you listen to God's word and you don't obey it, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. You see yourself, walk away, and forget what you look like. Now, that would be stupid, right? That would be like going to the mirror and me going, that's weird. I got snot running down my face. My hair's a mess. Somebody should do something about that. And then walking out of the room. Like, again, nobody would do that. And what James is saying right here, essentially, is that the Bible is like a mirror. When we begin to look into the Bible, when we begin to examine spiritual things, we should be asking, Lord, what do you want to say to me out of this passage? And what do I need to adjust in my life? Unfortunately, what has happened in the church is instead of using the Bible as a mirror, we've used it as a window. Instead of using the Bible as a mirror, we use it as a window. And instead of looking at ourselves in the mirror, we use the Bible as a window to look through and judge other people. And Paul is saying right here in the book of Romans, knock it off. Dude, you're just as bad. You don't have the right to judge other people. You don't have the right to condemn other people. And then he says this in verse 2, and we know that God in his justice will punish anyone who does such things. Stop. Anytime we read that God punishes evil people, I know a ton of Christians that get really excited. Well, they're getting what they deserve. They're getting what they deserve. Get them, God, get them. And Paul is writing to the church right here. He's writing to Christians, and he's saying, oh, hey, you guys who want to destroy all of the other people, all the evil people, and think that they're getting what they deserve, by the way, God's going to punish you too. Like God's going to handle his business. He says, since you judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment when you do the same things? Isn't that a legit question? If you're going to judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment for doing the same things? I was thinking the other day about masks. Masks are becoming quite the big debate, yes or no? Yes. I just got back from being away for a few days where everywhere we went had to wear a mask. Like we went to a museum, went to the Harley-Davidson Museum. When I say I went to the museum, it was the Harley-Davidson Museum, all right? It was a motorcycle museum. It wasn't like we're going to look into art. And so anyway, we had to wear a mask inside the thing. We were in there for about 4 hours. I seriously thought I was going to die. Cheating the mask thing every chance I got, like pulling it down, breathing when nobody was looking. It was awful. I'm not going to jump into the mask debate here today. But I will say this, and if this steps on your toes, sorry, not sorry. A lot of people have been putting on their mask and coming to church for years, way before COVID. You've been putting on a mask and coming to church for years. pretending to be somebody else. The reason that people won't take off their mask, well, actually, there are a few reasons. Number one is pride. Pride. You don't want people to really know what's really going on in your life. And number two is they've seen what's happened to other people who have took their mask off. Instead of being brought in, they got kicked out. Instead of being shown compassion, condemnation has been heaped on them. And so churches all over America, essentially what they do, is they celebrate Halloween 52 times a year. People put on their mask and come to church expecting to get a treat from God. And you know what? That shouldn't be the case. Shouldn't. Because church should be a place where you can come as you are, and you don't have to put on a fake mask, and you don't have to pretend. No matter who you are, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you, no matter when it happened, you can come in and you can receive compassion, and you can allow Jesus to change you. And Jesus changes you in his time, not ours. See, the problem is what most churches do is most churches put these programs together, and what most programs or what most churches refer to as discipleship is nothing more than control and manipulation. The church can't change you. Only Jesus can. Only Jesus can. It's time to take off our masks. It's time to be a place where people can take off their masks and know that condemnation is not going to come on them, but they're going to be surrounded with love and compassion. Let's keep reading verse 4. Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? Paul right here is saying the reason you are even saved is because of his kindness, because of his compassion. Listen, God didn't show up one night in your bedroom and yell at you until you finally said, fine, enough. God has been incredibly kind and compassionate to you as he has shown you grace upon grace. How incredibly kind has God been to you? I was reminded of this past week. I was on a fishing trip with my son. Now, everybody knows, I put out some pictures, and one of the big questions that everybody asks me is, I thought you hate fishing. I do. I'm not a fishing fan, but he is. And so we went fishing. We chartered a boat for 7 hours, all right? So that's problem number one. I was going to go on a 7-hour fishing trip. We had to leave at 4:30 in the morning. That's problem number two. I should have known right away that things weren't going to go good for Ryan. And so we get up out of the hotel. We arrive at the marina at 4:10. 4:10 in the morning. We go to where the charter company told us to wait, and we're waiting. Some guys are out there, some older guys, some experienced fisher people are out, and they're getting their boats in the water. And they begin to talk about the wind. And they're like, man, it really is windy today. I hope fishing's good. And Jair and I are sitting by ourselves, and we're listening to this. And I'm like, windy? Like, what are they talking? Church, there's barely a breeze. I mean, we live in Carroll, Iowa. We know what wind is, right? When the wind is there, like to us, like wind is nothing. But it's seriously like there's nothing happening. And we're just kind of like, what are these guys talking about? There's no wind. The next boat comes in, and these guys are talking about how it's windy. And they're just standing in their boat like, man, it sure is windy. The captain comes and picks us up and comes and takes us, and we're walking out to the boat that we're supposed to go to, and we're in the marina. And he says, hey, it's really windy out there. I hope you guys are okay with the rough lake. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to be fine. I'd gotten seasick years ago. I was on a diving trip, and I got seasick, and some of you know that story. And so I took some Dramamine, and Jaira had taken like some Dramamine for just in case, 7 hours. We're going to be out 7 hours. We don't want to get sick. And they're talking about this, and we're like, man, we're boaters. We've been on boats, and this is just a lake. This is no big deal. Man, we got out of the harbor, and that Lake Michigan was full of 3-foot waves. That boat that we were in is like jumping the waves. I mean, it was crazy. Long story short, 45 minutes into a 7-hour trip, Jaira and I are both violently seasick. Like every couple of minutes, we're over the side of the boat. That boat is getting rocked. It was absolutely horrible. The captain at one point looked at me and he said, I don't think you're going to make it 7 hours. I said, oh, I thought your name was Captain Mark, not Captain Obvious. and so he's asking, he's like, hey, we could try to go out like another 10 miles. I think it's still going to be rough out there, but I think that's where the fish are. So we're going to have to go out. And do you want to go out? Do you want to do it, or do you want to go back in? I looked at Jaira, and if my son would have told me that he wanted to stay out, I'm telling you, legit, I'd have toughed it out. I would have. I would have stuck it out if he wanted to stick it out. But he looked at me and he said, I can't. And so we went in. And I told the guy we can't. We just can't do it. And so we get in, and the captain says, okay, hey, this is how it works, man. We put lines in, and so you still have to pay me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Like I knew this was coming, but it was one of those awful thoughts, But I'm like, okay, I'm paying you these hundreds of dollars for this trip. And he looks at me and he says, look, normally we don't do this, but I feel bad for you guys. Really, he's talking about Jaira. And he says, if I could find time, would you guys like to try this later on in the week? And I'm like, sure. Like, I don't really want to. I'm like, this was awful. Like, let's just go do something else. Let's just go, like, sit on the beach, and I'll buy a fishing pole at Walmart, buddy, and you can just do that. So I'm like, sure, whatever, knowing that this guy is probably not going to call us at all. We called later that day, and he set us up for the next afternoon. And I called the doctor here in Carroll, and I asked for some motion sickness patches, the things you put behind your ear. And so they called those in, and we went and we picked those up, and we went out the next afternoon, and I don't know if it was the patches, I don't know if it was just that the lake was like glass, but we had an incredible time. We caught king salmon, and I don't know if you ever fished for those things, but man, they fight like crazy. The first fish that Jaira caught, legit, he fought for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. For 40 minutes, he fought a fish. The one that I caught, it was like a little bit under 10. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to sissy out 3 times. I thought I was going to have to hand him my pole or just let it go and let the fish take off with it and be like, sorry, man, shouldn't have brought us back out. It was incredible. It was so much fun. And the joy that we had together, being able to do that was just incredible. And as we were driving away that night with the cooler full of fish, I couldn't help but think how blessed I was to be able to have that trip. Like that guy, seriously, that guy could have condemned us. You seriously puking on my boat? The heck is wrong with you guys? Get out, never come back. You guys are disgusting. But he didn't do that. Instead of condemning us, he showed us unbelievable compassion. Hey, why don't we try this again later? Hey, it's not looking good for you guys right now, man. We should probably take you in. Hey, I'm willing to help you out. Hey, man, I'll save your, he legit said this to me. I'm going to do everything I can to save your trip with your son. To me, that was a reminder of God's compassion for me. Like God's compassion is the reason I have everything that I have in life. God's compassion is the reason I'm breathing. God's compassion is the reason I'm living. I don't deserve anything. I don't deserve his grace. In God's compassion, he saved me. At the end of the day, church, we all have to realize that we can't get anchored down by condemnation. We must be anchored in compassion. And so if you've got a friend or some friends or some family members who have walked away from God or walked away from church, I'm telling you, you're not going to get them back by yelling at them. Compassion is greater than condemnation. And listen to me, don't miss this. That's not the soft approach. That's not the, oh, you're selling out the culture approach. That's our Savior's approach. It's the approach he took with us. And if that's Jesus' approach, it's the approach that we should take when it comes to reaching the world. Listen to me. Central Church should be full of people that love Jesus and full of people that love like Jesus. And Jesus was about compassion. And that is what we need to be anchored to. Thank you so much for being with us. Remember, compassion. Compassion is greater than condemnation. Go out into a dark, hurting, lost world and show them that. Make that change. Be Jesus into a world who desperately needs to see him. God bless you all, and we'll see you next weekend.